right, I'm Chris Avina with American Outdoor News. I'm here with my friend Zack from Whitstone Habitat. Zack, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us today.
I appreciate you having me, Chris. I had a fun time with you at Poma, putzing around, shooting lots of other people's ammo, and talking about hunting and angling and cooking. So I'm excited to get into this.
And eating some scorpions.
That's right. Yeah, I think I can still taste it. It tastes like I've been chewing on a shrimp tail for the past 2 weeks.
I took my son to the movies the other day and eating the popcorn. It kind of brought back bad memories.
The same crunchiness. Yep. The kernel stuck in your teeth feels like a scorpion shell. I got you.
Yeah, it was like burnt popcorn. It was terrible. Now, Whetstone Habitat, um, you started this a number of years ago. Tell me a little bit about how you got started and what's the passion project behind it?
So I started Whetstone Habitat 6 years ago now. I went to school. I started beginning. I went to school for wildlife and fisheries management at West Virginia University. And while I was going to school there, I had the opportunity. I did an internship with the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources, and I was working on a wildlife management area. I think it was like 17,000 acres, southern West Virginia. But the manager I was working under, Travis, he was phenomenal. He's still an idol of mine in this space. I call him frequently to get his advice or guidance on certain things. But I really got my start there in Baileysville, West Virginia. And I remember having a conversation very vividly with Travis one day. Because at the time, I'm getting ready to graduate. I got one semester left. And I'm looking at Travis, and he's living on the house he's living in is paid for by the state. He's got
Nice.
17,000 acres that he gets to do virtually whatever he wants habitat wise on. And that's my big thing. I fell in love with habitat work. Just the optics, you change a landscape, it responds in a predictable manner. It's a lot faster than people want to give it credit for. I really fell in love with habitat work while I was out there. And so I remember sitting having lunch with Travis on the side of a mountain one day. And I was thinking, man, this you got it made, Travis. You got no mortgage payment. You're living here. You get to do whatever you want with the habitat work. You probably know where all the best hunting spots on this WMA are, this, that, or the other. I can't wait to graduate and get a job like this. And he told me point blank, he's like, you don't want to work for the state. He's like, you can do better. And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, this seems great. This seems like everything I ever wanted. And he's like, well, if I could do it all over again, I'd go private. I'd get into consulting. And I was like, what the heck? What does that even mean? I didn't know what habitat consulting was or this. And I got back and I started asking some questions and looking into it. And, I didn't make the move right then. I still spent 5 years working seasonal jobs in the wildlife field, bouncing all over the country. I worked for the Forest Service, worked in the private sector, bounced all around. That's kind of par for the course when you get a wildlife degree. Unless you get a master's or a doctorate, you kind of have to bounce around and get your experience before you get placed.
Sure.
So as I was doing that, I kind of got to every job I took pretty much had to do with habitat. So I was a little picky in terms of which jobs I would take on during that time frame. But it got to the point where I started realizing that when I was working for the Forest Service, something like we're just waiting for a fire to rip through the national. I was working in New Mexico, and it was like the place needed to burn. They couldn't get the permits to do a prescribed burn, so they're just sitting on their hands, the fire team waiting for a lightning strike. And then once it happens naturally, they can go fan the flames and try to get it to take over. But then you look at after the fire goes through and they're like, oh, there's fence damage. Oh, we have to go get 4 different surveys done before we can go rebuild that barbed wire fence. And it takes 3 years to get all the permits in place and and it's like you can't get anything done. There's so much between having an idea and getting it applied on the landscape. There's
Yep.
so much red tape involved. And I finally got to a point in my career where I was like, these private lands guys, these guys that dump their life savings into having a piece of property to go able to go hunt and take care of and enjoy, they don't have that red tape. Sometimes you get in a little bit of some rules when you get involved in these cost share programs, like through the NRCS, you can only manage certain ways, and that's in the fine print, but you're
Yep.
getting funding for it. So I found that if you want to have the biggest impact on the landscape, you have to work with private landowners. They're the ones that actually have the funding and can get the manpower to get this stuff done, and they're not stuck waiting, for permission to do
Yeah,
a lot of this
it
stuff. So
finally clicked on how the states actually work.
exactly, yeah, you want to get out of it. Now, working for myself, it does have its ups and downs. It's not a steady paycheck. Paying for your
It's
own
like anything
kind of
else,
sucks, but
start your own business. It's great. No, it's
uh-huh.
not. It
I'm
has its
still learning
benefits,
every
but
day.
you got nobody to blame but yourself if that check don't come through.
That's right. Yep. Makes things a whole lot more streamlined when it comes time to point the finger.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Whetstone Habitat, yeah, I mean, you're known for your commitment towards conservation. Um, how's your mission evolved and changed over the course of time?
So when I first got started, I was looking at what a lot of these other habitat consultants were doing, and a lot of the ways these people are making ends meet is they're getting in with seed companies or blind companies, and when they hand over a management plan, it's like, hey, you do all this stuff, but while you're at it, you need to buy these seeds to put in these places. You need these stands here, 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 and here. So they're capitalizing on the back end of the habitat work, which is
Yeah,
fine. But I've always kind of felt like that was a little naughty. I want people to come to me because they want the best possible habitat on the landscape. Like when I'm writing a management plan for a landowner, the very last thing that's going through my mind is what seed am I going to plant in that food plot?
yeah,
I'm thinking about how are the deer going to utilize the landscape? What are they lacking? What time of year do they need resources? Are we going to be hunting over this food plot, or is it just a nutrition site? There's so many things going into it. And at the end of the day, these creatures have been here for millions of years. They evolved with all our native vegetation. Most of what I do, my secret sauce is native habitat management. Get
yeah.
Mother Nature squared away. Get rid of all these non-natives that aren't producing results for you, and make room for all our native vegetation to come in. I'm a stickler for non-natives, for invasive species.
Sure.
Um, and a lot of people, when they want bigger deer on their farm, they only want to know, hey, what can I plant in my field, and what mineral rock can I put out there that's going to grow 200-inch deer? I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't always work that way. You
Yeah,
get that habitat squared away, and all those food plots and supplements, they become exactly that. They're supplemental resources for your deer herd. So I'd say a big change for me has been kind of realizing that you can get dang near perfect deer habitat without a food plot in sight. I had one location I was working on. It was when I first started Whitstone Habitat, I was working a second job on a 2,000 acre nonprofit, like membership based hiking trails and stuff. I was natural areas assistant for the natural areas manager. And it was incredible to me going around and doing all that habitat work. And we didn't have any food plots out there. We didn't have any corn or soybeans around. We
yeah.
just did prescribed fire. We didn't even thin the woodlots as much as I wanted to. I don't think they ever did a timber harvest on that 2,000 acres, and I think they could. I think they should. But
Yeah.
regardless, I still saw 160, 170-inch deer run around every year I was out there. And it's just because we took the time to get rid of those non-natives. And those deer are being harassed every single day from hikers going through, and they're still growing that big.
Yeah.
So it leads credence to the fact that, all these supplemental things to get these deer bigger. I see water supplements now. You pour you pour something in your water to make it taste better for deer, to make them grow bigger or something. I don't know. But at the end of the
Acorn
day, you get,
flavored.
yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, though, you get everything squared away habitat wise. You build it, they will come. So that's kind of been
Well,
my philosophy.
what are the most critical steps that a landowner or an outdoorsman can take to to support the wildlife habitat to enhance their land?
The first thing you need is a goal. You need to have a goal in mind. So if let's say we're talking about we want it's a deer hunting property, you have deer camp there every year, you want to improve the deer herd. The very first step would be figuring out, where that lowest hole in the bucket is. Whenever you describe managing for wildlife, people often describe everything they need you can fit inside of a bucket. But there's gonna be holes in that bucket. One of them might be water resources, one of them might be food resources in the summer, one of them might be bedding cover. Whatever that lowest hole is going to be what's limiting your resources what's limiting that deer herd from reaching its full potential. So figuring out what the biggest problem is, where that lowest hole in the bucket is, and addressing that. Oftentimes I show up on a property and it might be the deer herd's just too big. You might have too many deer on your property. I see a browse line. I'm seeing the understories eating out of house and home. The first step, especially when managing for deer, more so than other species, is if you're in an overpopulated area, the best thing you can do, I can tell you all the habitat advice in the world. I could tell you all the food plots you can plot. But if you're not taking that herd management seriously and reducing that number down to a reasonable size, they're going to eat themselves out of house and home. You're
Yeah.
just going to have more and more deer that aren't fit. You don't want to be at carrying capacity. You want to be below carrying capacity so there's a surplus of resources around.
Yeah.
So I'd say the first step would be, kind of diagnosing what that lowest, whether it's a nutritional gap or water resources, figuring out what the missing piece on your farm is and addressing that. Oftentimes, I go to a lot of farms and it's early successional cover. People like neat and tidy. They keep all the trails mowed. They keep all the open grounds mowed. Once it gets too weedy and messy, they kind of clean it up just for aesthetics. That's all your habitat you're getting rid of. So just kind of figuring out what that lowest thing is and starting from there. If it's a water resource, figure out how to get either a pond put in or get a drinker put in. If it is food related, you if you don't have enough food on the landscape and you have way too many deer, you can put more food out there, but you probably still won't have enough food on the ground. They're going to
Yeah.
eat out of house and home. So until you address that herd size, you're not going to make the leaps and bounds necessary.
Yeah, as long as you have a constant food source on your property year round, you'll always have deer there.
Yep.
How do you get the trophy deer on your property? You got to cultivate that as well.
Yeah, and the thing about deer, what I really love as a wildlife biologist, like I love deer, I love deer hunting. They're a cool animal. They have their own quirks and they're difficult to hunt. They have their own reasons to love them. But what I love about managing for whitetail is you hear this term thrown around all the time, an edge species. They call deer an edge species. Now, what that means is a white-tailed deer gravitate towards areas where two or more different habitat types come together, creating an edge. Now, why do I like this? I like this because when I'm managing a property for deer, say I got 200 acres and I'm managing it for deer, what I'm trying to do is figure out how many edges can I fit into that habitat. So, in other words, how many different types of habitat can I create in a manner that makes sense to increase the amount of edge availability on there? So, by managing for whitetail, I might put a focus on we need some more young forest. So, let's do a small clear cut over here. We need to thin this area. We'll do a crop tree release so you get more acorns over here. We're going to burn this site to reset it. We're going to do a riparian restoration zone along the creek. So, we're going to get a lot of shrubs planted in there and get that established. When you start building these things on top of each other and setting them up in a manner where you have good access and good hunting locations, just the fact of having all those different habitat types. Yes, I'm managing for deer, but at the end of the day, some of the areas I'll leave in mature timber. The flying squirrels, the woodpeckers will start pecking on those dead trees, the snags. They got a spot there. You look into the young forest habitat 2 years after you do that patch cut, and it's going to be full of songbirds in the springtime as those warblers are migrating through. You're going to see birds of all different colors utilizing that young forest habitat. You go out into that prairie you just recently burned and you're going to see the box turtles and the turkey poults running around in there, and every critter on that landscape that's supposed to be there is going to be able to find some real estate on your parcel that
Uh,
fits their personal needs. So
there's a whole trickle down effect.
yep, exactly. So
You
deer is a
put
great.
in water, or you put in a food source, it's going to flourish with an abundance of wildlife, not just whitetail.
Exactly, and that's why I love managing for whitetail. Like I said, it gives me an excuse as a biologist to put habitat on the ground for non-game species that otherwise wouldn't have a good spot to be.
So, how do you collaborate with hunters, farmers, and others to balance uh, restoration to coincide with recreational usage?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Collaborating with hunters and farmers and other outdoorsmen, how do you balance, or how would a landowner balance the restoration of the property
with people hunting it,
with recreational usage, whether it's hunting or
hiking.
quadding
Okay,
or
I understand
hiking.
the question. Yep. So that's one of the things where there's a lot of nuance in the habitat, especially the consulting world, where there's this word I kind of treat it as a naughty word. A sanctuary. A lot of people like deeming portions of their property a wildlife sanctuary. So a wildlife sanctuary in layman's terms, just for most landowners I work with, means you never go in there. You don't go in there for any reason. I don't like that. I can't tell you how many properties I've showed up on or I'm like, hey, what's back there? Oh yeah, we don't go back there. I went in there 3 years ago to help my nephew blood trail a doe, but I haven't been back there since. And so they use these areas and their head's in the right spot. They want to give a reprieve to these wildlife, a refuge, somewhere for them to get away and escape.
Yeah,
My thing is deer are always going to utilize parts of the landscape that humans aren't heavily trafficking in. They're just going to gravitate to those areas till they're not disturbed. Well, what ends up happening if you're essentially forcing these deer to utilize these areas that you're not managing, you're not actively managing those areas. Oftentimes it's like a cedar thicket that they don't want to deal with, or it's just like a bunch of like some laydowns from storm damage or whatever it might be.
mhm,
It's something they just don't want to touch it. So you go start walking back in those areas and kind of, taking an inventory of what's back in this sanctuary. And you realize those deer might be walking through there, but there's no beds back there. They're not browsing on. They're not spending any time in those sanctuaries. And if they are spending time in that sanctuary, it's not good quality habitat to minimize stress and allow them to grow the antlers you want them to grow. So I'm
yeah,
more of the mindset where, and I promise I'll get back to your question. When I'm managing a property, I want my clients managing every ounce of their property. At the very least, get into that sanctuary area and thin it out. Get it to be thicker with stuff other than red cedar.
yep,
Get some vegetation in there that those deer might actually be able to consume and utilize throughout the day while they're bedded down. You want to make those sanctuary areas every bit as productive as the non-sanctuary areas. So I
yeah.
don't really use the term sanctuary. You can read any of my plans. I stay away from. Like I said, I treat it as a naughty word. But what I do tell people, and I have a lot of clients where they like, the wife might like riding the side by side around. That's her thing. Whenever she gets the free time, she likes to go ride the trails. A couple clients like that. That's completely okay. The one area I will say is when hunting season's around the corner, you got 1 month before archery opens up. That's when you can start shutting down some of those trails. That's when you can start staying out of certain portions of your property. But the whole rest of the year, I'm still in there killing invasive species. I'm still in there doing habitat work and treating those deer will bounce back. They'll come back to
Sure.
the area. It doesn't take them long to figure out humans aren't going in there very often. So it's all about making your own parameters. As far as the habitat work, like doing prescribed burns and all that kind of stuff, it can be a really good opportunity where if you're trying to kill two birds with one stone, say, hey, I might have deer camp coming up this fall, but I really got to get this fire done this spring. All my buddies that are expecting to come shoot a doe this fall, hey, how you feel about getting out here in March and helping us with this prescribed burn, kind of earn your keep. So you can kind of
Sure.
utilize both sides of that equation to get work done out there. Um, I don't, like I said, getting out there, enjoying recreating on your property. I don't want it to ever be something like I don't want people to be afraid to use their properties. The whole reason you have that property is to enjoy it. And I think some people get a little too carried away with those sanctuary areas and kind of making things off limits, especially if you have kids and stuff. You're trying to get engaged
Yeah.
in the outdoors. You don't want to tell them they can't go that side of the farm.
Well,
Like let
that's
them be kids.
conservation versus preservation.
Yep.
Preservation is hands off. We're letting that grow.
Yeah.
Conservation is cultivating the property where you're getting the most use out of it and you're coinciding with the natural resources.
Yep. Active management.
Well, how are you adapting to the current conservation climate? It's always changing, it's always evolving. How is Whetstone Habitat moving with that?
So one of the things here lately I've been dealing with is funding mechanisms for cost share programs are kind of in a holding pattern with all the changes in the federal government. So that's a big one. A lot of people sitting on their hands at the moment trying to figure out if they should even apply to get these cost share programs this year or if they should hold off and wait till the dust settles and reapply next year. That's one of the major things I've been dealing with here with the current climate, what's going on, at least from the funding side. Um, but at the end of the day, one of the things I've been trying to do just personally, whether it's through my writing or through my, social media posts or just everyday interactions with the public, I'm constantly trying to bridge that gap between, the passionate landowner, passionate hunter out there getting their hands dirty, volunteering, doing all this stuff, and the casual hiker who might be an anti-hunter or a non-hunter, but they enjoy getting out there and utilizing those same resources we do. There's a lot of common ground there. I think a lot of people like to overlook, and they put up a shield or get on guard before the conversation even happens.
Sure.
When I'm looking at it, a lot of when I first started, and I haven't been as active on Instagram here lately, but one of the things when I first started with POMA, that was a big takeaway, is post often on Instagram. So I started doing that. And a lot of what I was posting was just stuff I was interested on. Yeah, I was posting like, hey, here's this spring ephemeral flower that I think is really cool. Here's why it's cool. It's pretty. And I started getting more and more and more followers that weren't hunters. California, I was getting a lot of people from California that were just like gardeners that were hikers that were just interested in stuff in the outdoors and being able to, yeah, I would lose some of them when I'd post a picture of a dead deer, but I think it just goes to show you that there's a lot of overlap, a lot of interest in the outdoors and the natural world, and being able to better equip yourself to communicate, our passions and why we do what we do.
Sure.
um, I don't think that's ever going to go out of fashion with the current state of conservation. I think we always need to be, one step ahead of the anti-hunters, and just have good arguments for ourselves. Just be prepared to defend what we do if you have to. But at the end of the day, it's like we're the ones paying for most of this conservation work going on out on the landscape. And not even the public lands. I mean, I look at my private landowners, and a lot of these guys, they don't even qualify for cost share programs. They make too much money, so they're paying for all of this work out of pocket. And then you look at the other side of the coin, and what are they doing? They're out getting signatures to ban hunting seasons.
Yeah.
We're not the same.
No, I mean, just the money we generate through the Pittman-Robertson Act is billions of dollars that go directly into conservation. Their money goes into hate campaigns.
I know. I wish every single item in REI was taxed with PR.
I was at REI
Be a
the
whole
other
lot
day.
more revenue for it. Then again, we'd give them a seat at the table. I don't know if I want.
So you got a lot of things going on as well. I mean, you are days away from getting your real estate license, which will really coincide with um, the Whitstone Habitat business.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. Thank you for bringing it up. I got all my documents submitted, so I'm kind of sitting on my hands waiting for the license to go up on the wall. But it should be any day now, and I'm super excited. I'm stoked to work with the company I'm working with, Tut Land Company. They go out of their way to work land guys. They hire they have multiple wildlife biologists on staff. They have a bunch of people from the timber industry. They have people from the poultry farm industry. They find land people that know land, and they help connect them with clients that are looking to build something. So I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. Even before I graduated college, my dad had dropped the idea of getting my real estate license because he thought it might be a good fit. I was a little too prideful for that. I don't know. I'm a biologist. I'm a biologist, Dad. I'm not a salesman. And blah blah blah. But fast forward to here recently, and I realized that a lot of my clients that I'm getting recently purchased their property. So I have mostly two different types of clients. One that's had their property for a long time. They've been trying it on their own. They get to a point where they're stuck and they want to try something different. So they'll have me come give them a fresh set of eyes on their property. That's one set. The other set of people recently dumped their entire life savings into a piece of property, and they want to just make sure they're doing everything right and taking care of it. And I realized that I'm missing the boat. It's the same exact clientele for my habitat business as will be with Tut Land Company.
Yeah.
And not only can I help them, set up their property and find the right property, I feel like I could have helped them find a better property than the one they might have ended up with. So all I do all day long is think about how people can improve their land. I look at land, I think about what's wrong with it and how do we get to where it needs to be.
Yep.
So with my background, I think it fits perfectly with the whole rural real estate, recreational properties, because I'll be able to help people find that diamond in the rough that they might not have to put, as much effort into getting it where they want to go. I see properties through a different lens than I think most people do, just because of my background and
Yeah.
my current occupation. So I'm super excited to get going. It's a big venture. It's a big bite to to take off of my current load, but I'm stoked.
Well, there's a lot of money, a lot of ways to earn income off of your hunting property. You can uh, clear part of it for lumber. You could thin out your forest areas. You can lease some of it to a local farmer to plant or put their cows or something like that.
And there's a
Um,
lot of cost share programs as well. That's something a lot of people don't realize is through the USDA. I like the EQIP programs, environmental quality incentives programs. But there's a lot of funding out there where the federal government has realized that if they want to save these resources, these natural resources we have, they have to rely on our private landowners. This country is mostly private land. And so
yep.
they have a lot of good incentives out there. We're like, hey, if you manage this property this way, if you manage these acres this way, we have this much funding availability. Or maybe this area is lacking in, oak savannas. It used to have oak savannas to this region. So we're going to have funding availability for you to, and it might not pay for the entire project, but it's going to cover a good portion of that project. They're going to have contractors list for people that you might need to get that project done, but they want to incentivize landowners for taking care of their properties. So there's a lot of good opportunities out there. And then something I've been paying attention to is there's a lot of flipping of properties going on here recently where someone will buy a parcel, spend, a year or two turning it. They might do a timber harvest. They'll get some food plots in place. They'll
Yep.
get some blinds out there and do the kind of that turnkey hunting property. I think there's a ton of margin there for profits. And I've had a couple clients in the past bring up doing something like that with me, but I hadn't had my real estate license and it was kind of hard to figure out how to make that financially worthwhile for me. But now that window is wide open and I'll be excited to get started on some projects like that as well.
Is there a acreage requirement to participate in some of those programs?
I believe I'm not the best one to talk to. Most of my clients have at least 20 acres. I
Okay.
had one client that was 19 acres, but all of them qualifies were eligible. I'm not sure. I think it has more to do with how much you're putting into the project. So I know like the pollinator programs, there's a lot of money involved with the pollinator program. It's pretty expensive to get the seeds that they're looking for to do that. But I think the acreage requirement might only be 1 acre. I'm pretty sure it's one
Oh,
acre and
wow.
you can split it up. So if you have a half acre on one side of the driveway and a half acre on the other, you can qualify. So stuff like that. I think there are some restrictions though, like around easements and power lines. Um, I would encourage anybody. Again, I don't work for the NRCS, so I'm kind of a liaison between landowners and the NRCS. So I always point people, their county, whatever county your property's in, is going to have a natural resource conservation services or a soil and water conservation office. Contact them. They'll be able to answer all these types of questions. And the most important thing I always tell anybody, even before I do a consult, if you're interested in these cost share programs and you already have a farm, get a farm number, go to the NRCS office and get your farm registered through the NRCS, because that's one step of the process you can knock out right away before any of the management plan is even written. You're going to need a farm number just to qualify for any of this stuff. So,
Is that's national
yep.
NFCS?
Yep, NRCS is national. And like so in Tennessee, a lot of those positions are joint positions with Quail Forever and NRCS. I think they get half their salary from each or something like that. But every state's different. I know in Kentucky, a lot of times those positions are joint positions with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife and
Yeah.
NRCS. When I was in state to state, it's different, but there should be a farm bill biologist on staff, depending, regardless of where his funding is coming from, they kind of have the same role.
Because I know there's state programs and then there's federal programs.
Yep,
So
yep. And you can look into both. I familiarize myself more so with the federal programs just because it helps me when I'm working across state lines. But like I just found out this morning, I was talking to a quail biologist with Quail Forever here in Tennessee, and they have their own separate funding pool for 5 of the counties in Tennessee just for quail restoration habitat. So there are some special opportunities like that where funding might be insulated from the rest of the bozos in your state. But it's definitely something to look into. I think people would be surprised at the amount of cost shares out there, and it goes both ways. I have clients that don't want the government to have anything to do with their property, which is completely understandable and reasonable.
sure.
But on the other side of the coin, there's a lot of people that might not be able to get some of this conservation work done unless they get a little financial assistance. So that's what these programs are for.
All right. Well, where can we find out more about Whitstone Habitat and how can somebody get in touch with you?
So my website is Whitstone Habitat. That's Whetstone, whetstonehabitat.com. I do a newsletter. I try to get it out there weekly, but I've been traveling a lot lately. It's a Whitstone Weekly. You can just Google Whitstone Weekly. Again, Whetstone. And then you'll be able to find me soon. As soon as my license is up on the wall, I'll be up on the Tut Land Company's website as well. So by all means, if anybody has any questions, you can find me on any of the social media. It's Whitstone Habitat. Reach out. I have if you got a property, there's a contact me form on my website. If you want to give me some information on your parcel, we can set up an appointment. We can do a Zoom call and kind of walk you through my process and how I do these management plans. And by all means, if you're getting ready to buy a piece of property or list your property in the state of Tennessee, please reach out. I'm eager to hit the ground running.
All right. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. Definitely go to the website, check it out. And if you haven't subscribed to a podcast, definitely hit that button now, subscribe, and we'll see you again next week.
Appreciate you, Chris.
All right, man. Thanks again.